Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to the English Globe, a place where we bring you long, meaningful, and easy-to-understand conversations about the world, helping you improve your English while learning about important global events that shape our international community. And today, we are beginning another detailed episode that will guide you step by step through a topic many people talk about but often find difficult to fully understand because it involves history, politics, geography, security, and diplomacy all at the same time. I am very happy you are here with us, and I hope you are ready for a calm, friendly, and educational discussion designed especially for English learners who want to build confidence in listening, understand long explanations, and practice following real-world issues through simple, clear, and natural language that makes learning both comfortable and enjoyable.
Today's topic is Japan, China, and Taiwan. What's really happening right now? And we are going to explore this situation in a slow, easy way that helps you understand why these three places are connected, why many governments and news organizations around the world pay close attention to this relationship, and why conversations about Japan, China, and Taiwan appear so frequently in international news, global reports, and political discussions that influence how countries communicate with one another. This situation is important because Japan and China are two of the largest and most influential countries in Asia, while Taiwan is a small but very important island with a strong economy, advanced technology, and a unique political position. And understanding how these three interact helps learners follow global stories and think about how nations protect their interests, cooperate with partners, and respond to changes in their region.
We chose this topic because many English learners want to understand what is happening in Asia right now, especially in the area around Taiwan, where different countries have different views about security, identity, economics, and regional stability. And learning these ideas in simple English helps build the foundation you need when reading newspapers, watching documentaries, or following international conversations that involve diplomacy, negotiations, partnerships, and peaceful communication between nations. This episode will give you a clear starting point, focusing not on political arguments, but on helping you understand the basic ideas behind this issue so you can read or listen to global news with more confidence and recognize vocabulary that appears often when countries like Japan and China express their opinions about security, trade, or regional developments.
For English learners, global topics like this one are extremely valuable because they include a wide range of useful vocabulary such as strategy, partnership, territory, regional security, and diplomatic relations. And hearing these words used in real context helps you remember them more naturally and understand how they connect to the real world. When you learn about Japan, China, and Taiwan in simple English, you also practice understanding long and detailed explanations, which is an important skill for improving listening, building fluency, and preparing yourself to understand more advanced content in the future, whether you study international relations, business, travel, or global communication.
Before we continue deeper into today's subject, we kindly invite all our wonderful listeners to support the English Globe by liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and turning on notifications, because your support helps us continue creating long educational episodes that explain complex topics in clear and simple language, designed especially for learners who want to improve their English through real-world stories and calm, professional conversations. Your support motivates us to keep producing high-quality content that connects English learning with global understanding, and it helps our community grow so more learners around the world can benefit from free, accessible, and friendly lessons about international events.
We would also love to hear from you in the comments section, so please tell us where you are listening from and share your thoughts about today's topic. Because hearing from different countries and cities makes this channel feel like a global classroom where learners support and inspire each other. Feel free to write what you already know about Japan, China, or Taiwan. What questions you would like us to answer in this episode, and what other global topics you want us to talk about in future lessons, because your ideas help us create episodes that match your interests and learning goals.
Your comments help us improve each new episode, and knowing our listeners' locations and backgrounds reminds us that English truly connects people across cultures, regions, and traditions, which is why we encourage you to participate, share your experiences, and tell us if learning about international issues helps you practice English more effectively and with greater confidence. We enjoy reading your feedback, and it helps us design episodes that introduce useful vocabulary, explain complicated events in simple ways, and give you more opportunities to practice listening to long, clear, and meaningful English content.
Now that we have welcomed our listeners and explained why today's topic matters, let us begin exploring this situation step by step, starting with clear explanations about why Japan pays close attention to Taiwan, why China sees the island as extremely important, and why this relationship shapes many conversations about security, trade, cooperation, and peace in East Asia. Understanding these basics will help you follow the rest of the episode easily and give you a strong foundation for learning about one of the most important international issues in the world today.
To understand the relationship between Japan, China, and Taiwan today, it is important to begin with a simple and clear explanation of Taiwan's modern political status, because many English learners hear about Taiwan in the news but may not know exactly how its current situation developed over time or why different countries describe it in different ways. Taiwan is a small island off the southeastern coast of China, and it has its own government, its own economy, its own elections, and its own political system. This means that Taiwan operates like a separate country in daily life, with its own laws, leaders, passports, military, and international relationships, even though China claims Taiwan as part of its territory. Understanding this difference between daily reality and political claims is an important starting point for learning about Taiwan's position in global affairs. When people talk about Taiwan's political status, they usually refer to the question of how Taiwan should be recognized internationally. Some countries have close unofficial relations with Taiwan, but very few officially recognize it as an independent country. This situation exists because China strongly believes that Taiwan must remain connected to the Chinese nation, and China is a major global power with a large economy and significant influence in international organizations. As a result, most countries choose to maintain diplomatic ties with China rather than Taiwan to avoid conflict, even though they still trade with Taiwan, communicate with Taiwan, and support Taiwan's economic and cultural presence. For English learners, the term political status simply refers to how a place is recognized, represented, and treated at a global level.
To understand why China feels strongly about Taiwan, we need to look at some history, especially the events of the mid-20th century. After the Chinese Civil War ended in 1949, two separate governments existed: the People's Republic of China on the mainland and the Republic of China, which moved to Taiwan. Both sides claimed they were the real government of all China. Over time, the mainland became internationally recognized, while Taiwan developed into a modern democracy with free elections and a strong economy. This history explains why China still sees Taiwan as a part of its national identity, while many people in Taiwan see themselves as having their own separate identity. However, Taiwan's history does not begin there. For many centuries, Taiwan had cultural and economic ties with different groups, including Chinese settlers, indigenous communities, and foreign powers. One important part of Taiwan's past is its relationship with Japan. Japan controlled Taiwan from 1895 to 1945, a period of 50 years that had a major influence on Taiwan's infrastructure, education, and culture. Many older buildings, roads, and administrative systems in Taiwan were shaped during this era. Even today, some older generations in Taiwan speak Japanese, and cultural ties between the two places remain strong. This history is one reason Japan continues to pay close attention to Taiwan's situation, especially when it comes to security in East Asia.
When we look at Taiwan's history as a whole, we can see why it has become such an important part of Asian geopolitics. Geopolitics is a useful word for English learners, and it simply means how geography, like location, borders, and strategic areas, affects political decisions and relationships. Taiwan's location is extremely important because it sits near major shipping routes used by many countries, including Japan and South Korea. These routes are necessary for trade, energy supplies, and global transportation. Taiwan is also close to large populations, important economies, and key military zones, which makes it a central point in many regional discussions. This location is one reason Japan and China both care deeply about what happens in and around Taiwan. But geopolitics is not only about location, it also includes economic and technological importance. Taiwan produces many of the world's most advanced computer chips, which are used in smartphones, cars, medical equipment, and military technology. The company TSMC, based in Taiwan, is one of the largest and most advanced chip manufacturers in the world. This means that countries everywhere depend on Taiwan's technology to keep their industries strong. For English learners, the vocabulary word semiconductors refers to these tiny but powerful electronic components. Because Taiwan plays such an important role in global technology, many countries pay close attention to its safety and stability.
To help English learners follow this topic more easily, let's introduce a few important vocabulary words often used in discussions about Taiwan. The first word is sovereignty, which means the right of a place to govern itself without outside control. When people talk about Taiwan's future, they often discuss whether Taiwan should have full sovereignty or whether it should eventually unify with mainland China. The second word is deterrence, which means actions taken to prevent conflict by showing strength or readiness. Some countries support Taiwan quietly because they believe it helps maintain deterrence in the region. The third word is status quo, which refers to keeping things the way they are now without major changes. Many governments prefer the status quo in Taiwan because it avoids conflict while allowing cooperation to continue. Another useful word is regional stability, which describes peace and safety across a large area. When Japan talks about Taiwan, it often uses this phrase because any changes around Taiwan could affect Japan's security, its trade routes, and its long coastline facing the Pacific. Japan also uses the phrase shared interests, meaning that Taiwan and Japan benefit from similar goals, such as stable seas, free trade, and peaceful communication. For English learners, understanding these vocabulary terms helps you follow news articles and political statements more confidently.
When we put all of this history together, China's claims, Taiwan's modern democracy, Japan's past influence, and the island's important location, we begin to see why Taiwan plays such a major role in Asian geopolitics today. This history does not predict the future, but it explains why countries speak carefully about Taiwan and why peace, communication, and diplomacy are emphasized so often. Understanding how Taiwan reached its modern position helps English learners follow global events without confusion, and it provides a strong foundation for understanding the discussions between Japan, China, and other countries in East Asia.
By learning this simple but important history, English learners gain not only vocabulary, but also a deeper understanding of how the modern world works, how countries communicate, and how geography and history shape international decisions. In the next section, we will explore how Japan sees Taiwan today and why Japan's perspective plays such a significant role in this ongoing situation.
China's current position on Taiwan is deeply rooted in the principle often called the One China policy, which states that Beijing considers Taiwan to be part of China, and this principle guides almost all of China's political, economic, and security decisions regarding the island. China argues that Taiwan cannot declare independence without violating China's territorial integrity, and this stance shapes not only its internal policies but also its international approach, meaning that any foreign country interacting with Taiwan must carefully consider Beijing's objections to avoid tensions. And understanding this principle is critical for English learners because it frequently appears in news articles, reports, and political discussions.
At the same time, China emphasizes a preference for peaceful reunification, which means it wants to bring Taiwan under its control without conflict. But it also makes clear through official statements that any movement toward formal independence is unacceptable and may trigger strong responses. This dual approach shows that China combines negotiation, diplomacy, and threat of force in a calculated manner. And learning words like sovereignty, which refers to a state's right to govern itself, or deterrence, which refers to using strength to prevent an action, can help English learners follow discussions about Taiwan and international relations with greater clarity.
Beijing uses multiple methods to enforce its policy and communicate its position, including public speeches by leaders, military drills near the Taiwan Strait, statements in state media, and diplomatic pressure on other countries to limit their engagement with Taiwan. And these actions demonstrate China's commitment to preventing the island from moving toward independence while simultaneously encouraging countries to recognize the One China principle. Understanding this mix of military, diplomatic, and economic strategies introduces learners to the vocabulary of international relations, including terms like geopolitics, which refers to how geography affects politics, and strategic signaling, meaning communicating intentions through actions rather than words.
In addition to military and diplomatic measures, China leverages economic tools such as trade restrictions, investment decisions, and control of supply chains to influence Taiwan and discourage countries from recognizing or supporting it as independent. For example, Beijing may limit imports from or exports to companies and countries that interact too closely with Taiwan, which is a form of economic pressure designed to reinforce its policy goals without resorting to open conflict. And for English learners, the words sanctions or economic leverage are important because they describe these non-military ways of influencing behavior in global politics.
China also pays attention to international recognition of Taiwan, which is another way it asserts its policy goals, because recognition means officially accepting a place as a sovereign state. Only a few countries formally recognize Taiwan due to China's diplomatic influence, while many others maintain unofficial relations to balance economic interests with political realities. And this creates a complex situation in which Taiwan operates as a self-governing democracy, but is limited in its formal international participation. So, understanding vocabulary like diplomatic recognition and sovereign state is useful for learners trying to follow news stories about China, Taiwan, and international organizations.
In recent years, China has made clear through official statements and policy documents that Taiwan is a core national interest, which means it is essential for China's identity, security, and future stability. These statements often occur during major meetings, political anniversaries, or military exercises, and they send a message both to Taiwan and to other countries that any attempt to formalize independence is unacceptable, and teaching English learners the phrase core interest can help them understand similar expressions in news reports about territorial disputes, national security, and regional policies.
Another aspect of China's position is that it frequently emphasizes dialogue, but under terms favorable to Beijing, which shows that it wants to appear reasonable internationally while maintaining firm control over the conversation. This dual strategy combines negotiation with pressure, making it clear that China seeks peaceful solutions if Taiwan follows its rules, but it also reserves the right to act decisively if it perceives challenges to its authority, and vocabulary like negotiation, diplomacy, and policy stance are useful because they explain how governments communicate intentions and respond to international developments in structured ways.
China's military demonstrations near Taiwan are a critical component of its policy and are often described as exercises to ensure preparedness and project power, not necessarily to provoke war at every moment, but they are intended to signal that China has the capability to act, if necessary. For English learners, understanding terms like military deterrence, which means showing strength to prevent action, and strategic positioning, which refers to placing forces or assets in locations that increase influence, can clarify why these exercises attract so much international attention and why countries like Japan, the United States, and others monitor them closely.
Economically, Taiwan's global importance also affects China's approach, because Taiwan produces a significant portion of the world's advanced computer chips, or semiconductors, which are used in smartphones, computers, cars, and medical equipment. So maintaining influence over Taiwan is not only about sovereignty, but also about ensuring access to critical technology. This combination of economic, military, and political factors creates a complex environment in which China's policies are carefully calculated, and understanding phrases like economic leverage or technological dependence is essential for English learners who want to follow global news accurately.
China's recent actions include increasing patrols near the Taiwan Strait, announcing joint military drills, and issuing statements warning against external interference, all intended to reinforce its One China policy without necessarily provoking immediate conflict. For learners, the phrases military patrol, state media announcement, and external interference are useful because they appear often in news reports discussing disputes between countries, international responses, and diplomatic messaging, allowing learners to connect English vocabulary with real-world examples in context.
Finally, China's approach combines multiple elements: political messaging, economic tools, military readiness, and strategic communication, to shape both the local and international environment in ways that align with its long-term goals regarding Taiwan. And for English learners, observing how these strategies are described in simple terms helps build understanding of the broader field of international relations while expanding vocabulary about diplomacy, strategy, and security in a way that is both practical and engaging.
By understanding China's current position on Taiwan, learners gain insight into how large countries manage complex territorial issues, balance diplomacy with strategic interests, and use a combination of economic, political, and military tools to influence outcomes, and learning key vocabulary such as sovereignty, deterrence, diplomatic recognition, economic leverage, strategic signaling, core national interest, negotiation, military deterrence, and external interference helps listeners follow global news more effectively while improving English comprehension in a real-world context.
Japan's concern about Taiwan is closely connected to its own security and stability in the region, because Taiwan sits just south of Japan's Southwest Islands and controls important sea routes that Japan relies on for trade, energy, and communication with other countries, and any disruption in Taiwan's situation, whether political or military, could affect Japan's economy, shipping lanes, and national defense planning, which is why Japan carefully monitors developments in Taiwan and seeks to maintain peaceful relations while protecting its own strategic interests.
Geography plays a key role in Japan's perspective, because Taiwan lies near the East China Sea and the Pacific Ocean, forming a natural barrier and gateway to areas Japan relies on for commerce and security. This means that if Taiwan were ever involved in conflict, it could directly affect Japan's ports, shipping routes, and even the movement of energy supplies like oil and gas that arrive from the Middle East and other regions. And understanding this geographic relationship is crucial for learners, because it explains why countries often consider nearby islands or territories as strategically important for both security and trade.
Japan's economic interests are also closely linked to Taiwan, because the island is home to some of the world's most advanced technology industries, including semiconductor production, which is critical for Japanese companies producing electronics, automobiles, and industrial machinery. And if Taiwan's supply chains were disrupted, Japanese businesses could face delays, shortages, and higher costs, which is why Japan pays attention not only to military or political developments, but also to the stability of Taiwan's economy. And learners can see how economics and security often intersect in international relations.
In terms of defense, Japan has long-standing agreements with the United States and relies on a network of regional partnerships to maintain security, and Taiwan's location makes it a key point for monitoring military movements, potential threats, and regional stability. Because if Taiwan faced pressure or conflict, Japan could find itself directly affected due to proximity, trade routes, and strategic positioning. Understanding terms like regional security and strategic positioning can help English learners follow news articles, international reports, and diplomatic statements without confusion.
Japan also expresses concern through diplomatic channels, international forums, and public statements that emphasize peaceful resolution, because the Japanese government promotes stability, cooperation, and dialogue rather than conflict, and it works to maintain communication with both Taiwan and China while supporting broader rules-based international systems, which makes Japan a participant in discussions that aim to prevent escalation and encourage problem-solving through negotiation, which introduces vocabulary like diplomacy, meaning managing international relations peacefully, and negotiation, meaning discussions to reach agreement.
To understand Japan's perspective fully, we can consider key vocabulary used in international relations, such as strategic interest, which means something a country values for security, trade, or influence; buffer zone, which is a geographic area that separates two potentially hostile regions; and defensive posture, which describes the preparation or positioning of forces to protect a country. And learning these words helps English learners follow reports on Asia-Pacific security and see why Japan considers Taiwan important, even if it is not a neighbor in the strict political sense.
Japan's concern is also about maintaining stability across the East Asia region, because Taiwan's security contributes to predictable shipping lanes, safe commerce, and regional peace, which is essential for Japan's economy and society. If the region became unstable, it could affect trade with South Korea, China, the United States, and other partners, showing learners how economic, security, and political concerns often overlap, and how countries consider both immediate and long-term effects when creating policies or participating in discussions about neighboring regions.
Japan's strategy is not to provoke conflict, but to ensure that it can respond to any changes without escalating tension, which is why its policies often include close monitoring, joint exercises with allies, and public statements supporting peaceful resolution, and understanding phrases like contingency planning, which means preparing for possible future problems, and peaceful resolution, which means solving disagreements without fighting, helps English learners see how countries use calm and careful language to describe serious strategic decisions in international affairs.
Finally, Japan's concerns about Taiwan show how geography, economics, and defense intersect to influence a country's policy decisions, and learners can see that national security is not only about military power, but also about trade routes, access to resources, partnerships, and maintaining a stable environment for citizens, and learning vocabulary like regional stability, strategic partner, geopolitical importance, and economic leverage helps English learners understand the same words and phrases they will encounter in news reports, documentaries, and international discussions about East Asia.
By understanding Japan's concerns, learners can recognize that Taiwan's situation is not only a local issue, but part of a larger network of regional relations, economic dependencies, and security considerations. And knowing the related vocabulary allows English learners to follow news stories confidently, understand international policy reports, and see how countries like Japan carefully balance dialogue, partnerships, and preparedness to ensure peace and stability while protecting their own national interests, making it an excellent example of learning both English and global awareness simultaneously.
The United States has been involved in East Asia for many decades, and its presence continues to shape the relationships between Japan, China, and Taiwan, because America plays a role as both a security partner and a trade partner, influencing regional stability through alliances, diplomatic engagement, and economic connections. And for English learners, understanding this involvement is important because terms like alliance and partnership frequently appear in news reports, international analysis, and political discussions that describe how countries cooperate to maintain peace and protect mutual interests.
America's involvement is not just military, but also economic and diplomatic, because it trades with Japan, China, and Taiwan, while also participating in dialogues, negotiations, and multilateral forums that address regional security and economic cooperation. And the US encourages peaceful communication between these countries, promoting stability and dialogue rather than confrontation, which shows learners that diplomacy often combines negotiation, communication, and careful signaling to prevent conflicts and maintain a balance of power that benefits multiple nations simultaneously.
One of the key elements of American strategy in East Asia is its alliances and security partnerships, particularly with Japan, where formal agreements allow the U.S. military to operate in the region and provide a framework for joint exercises, disaster response, and strategic planning. This alliance strengthens Japan's security while also indirectly influencing Taiwan's safety, because a strong Japan acts as a stabilizing factor in the region, and learning the term security alliance helps English learners understand how countries work together to protect each other and share responsibilities for maintaining peace.
The United States also supports Taiwan through indirect measures such as arms sales, technical cooperation, and public statements that emphasize peaceful resolution while discouraging unilateral changes to the status quo. And these actions help Taiwan maintain its defense without provoking direct confrontation, showing learners that diplomacy often involves subtle actions and carefully worded communication. And key vocabulary includes arms support, meaning providing weapons or defense tools, and status quo, which refers to maintaining the current situation without sudden changes.
America's economic involvement is equally important because it maintains trade relationships with all three entities, importing and exporting goods such as technology, machinery, and electronics, and participating in global supply chains that connect Japan, China, and Taiwan. These economic ties influence decisions because disruptions in one area can affect the others, and vocabulary like economic interdependence or trade relations is essential for learners who want to understand how commerce can influence politics, security, and regional stability in clear, real-world contexts.
The United States often plays the role of a mediator, using diplomacy to encourage discussion and negotiation between Japan, China, and Taiwan, because it seeks to reduce misunderstandings, prevent escalation, and maintain stability in the region. And phrases like diplomatic engagement, which means using formal talks to manage relations, and conflict prevention, which refers to efforts to stop disagreements from becoming violent, are useful for learners who want to understand English used in news reports, governmental statements, and policy analysis.
American involvement also emphasizes joint military exercises, intelligence sharing, and strategic planning, which are conducted in ways that reassure allies such as Japan and support Taiwan's self-defense, while signaling to China the U.S. commitment to regional security. And learners can understand vocabulary like strategic planning, meaning preparing in advance for potential challenges, and intelligence sharing, meaning exchanging information about potential threats or opportunities, which frequently appear in discussions about international security and military cooperation.
U.S. diplomacy in the region is carefully balanced, because it wants to maintain strong relations with China, which is a major trading partner and global power, while also supporting Taiwan and Japan. This balancing act requires subtlety, patience, and careful communication, and vocabulary such as balancing act, meaning managing competing interests, and multilateral diplomacy, meaning discussions involving multiple countries, helps learners understand why the United States often engages in careful messaging, joint statements, and coordinated policies without creating unnecessary tension.
America's treaties and informal partnerships create a network of security, trade, and communication that links Japan, China, and Taiwan in ways that are not always obvious, but are extremely influential. Because when the U.S. takes a diplomatic stance, provides economic incentives, or signals support for Taiwan and Japan, it changes how China perceives risks, how Taiwan plans its policies, and how Japan prepares for potential challenges. And for learners, terms like strategic network and policy signaling clarify these complex interactions in English language discussions.
Finally, understanding the US factor shows learners how one country can influence multiple actors in a region through alliances, partnerships, trade, and diplomacy, and observing vocabulary like alliance, partnership, security cooperation, diplomatic channels, and conflict management provides a practical way to link English learning with real-world international events, making it easier to follow news reports, understand policy analysis, and connect global discussions with the English language in a meaningful, educational, and professional manner.
When discussing Taiwan, Japan, China, and the U.S., it is important to understand the balance between military pressure and diplomatic talks, because countries often show strength through military exercises, patrols, or deployments to signal their interests, while also using diplomacy to negotiate agreements and prevent conflicts. And for English learners, words like deterrence, which means showing military power to prevent action, and negotiation, which refers to discussions to reach an agreement, are central to understanding how international relations operate in a calm and structured way.
Military pressure does not always mean an immediate threat of war. Often it is used as a signal to other countries, showing that a government is serious about protecting its claims or interests. And in the case of Taiwan, China conducts exercises near the island. The United States shows support through alliances, and Japan monitors regional security, which creates a complex environment where countries communicate both through words and actions. And English learners can understand this concept better by thinking of military signaling as a careful message rather than an aggressive attack.
At the same time, diplomatic talks are essential for keeping the region peaceful, because miscommunication between countries can lead to misunderstandings, escalating tensions, or unintended consequences, and diplomacy provides a structured way to discuss differences, manage disputes, and maintain dialogue, which is why international leaders often use formal statements, summits, or joint agreements to clarify intentions, and vocabulary like diplomatic engagement and peaceful resolution helps learners recognize the language used in official documents, news, and international negotiations.
International laws and agreements play a critical role in guiding how countries interact, because they provide clear rules for behavior, including limits on the use of force, principles for respecting territorial integrity, and guidelines for communication in disputes, and in the case of Taiwan. Agreements such as the United Nations Charter, the Law of the Sea, and regional treaties set the framework for what is considered lawful action, teaching learners vocabulary, such as international law, meaning rules recognized by most countries, and treaty, which is a formal agreement between nations.
Deterrence is a key concept in military and diplomatic strategies because it allows countries to prevent actions they consider harmful without resorting to actual conflict. And in East Asia, this means China, the US, and Japan sometimes conduct exercises or show presence to maintain influence while leaving room for negotiation. and learners can understand deterrence as a peaceful tool of influence combined with diplomacy that aims to prevent misunderstanding or miscalculations that could escalate tensions unnecessarily.
Negotiation is equally important because it enables countries to discuss disagreements, trade-offs, and potential compromises without fighting. And in the context of Taiwan, negotiation may involve indirect talks, multilateral forums, or back-channel communication to reduce risk while clarifying positions, and learning words like dialogue, mediation, and conflict management helps English learners understand how governments communicate and resolve problems in ways that are constructive, structured, and globally recognized.
Peaceful resolution refers to solving disputes without using violence, and in international relations, this is often achieved through a combination of diplomacy, dialogue, adherence to laws, and carefully calibrated military readiness, meaning countries prepare for possible threats but do not act aggressively unless absolutely necessary. And learners can see that words like peaceful resolution, preventive measures, and risk assessment describe strategies that keep regions stable while allowing governments to maintain security and protect citizens without escalation.
Miscommunication risks are high in areas like Taiwan because of different languages, political systems, and communication styles. And even small misunderstandings can trigger tension if actions are misinterpreted, which is why countries rely on clear statements, official channels, and international protocols to clarify intentions. And learners can understand vocabulary like clarification, meaning making information clear, and protocol, meaning accepted procedures, which appear often in diplomatic and international news reports.
Balancing military pressure with diplomatic talks is an ongoing challenge, because showing strength can deter threats, but excessive displays may create fear or misinterpretation, while dialogue can build trust, but sometimes appears slow or ineffective. And this combination requires careful planning, continuous observation, and a willingness to engage in international norms and vocabulary such as strategic balance, confidence building, and mutual understanding helps learners follow how countries manage complex interactions responsibly.
In East Asia, especially around Taiwan, combining deterrence with diplomacy allows countries like China, Japan, and the US to communicate intentions, maintain regional security, and reduce the likelihood of conflict. And learners can practice English by following news articles, official statements, or educational reports using these key words: negotiation, deterrence, peaceful resolution, diplomacy, mediation, and international law, which connect language learning directly with understanding real-world global issues in a safe and educational way.
Finally, understanding the balance between military pressure and diplomatic talks helps English learners see how global powers manage risks, prevent conflicts, and ensure stability while still protecting national interests. And by focusing on educational explanations and neutral language, learners can follow global news about Taiwan, China, Japan, and the US, expand their vocabulary in international relations, and gain confidence in understanding complex topics in clear, structured English. Taiwan's semiconductor industry plays a central role in global technology because it produces a significant portion of the world's most advanced computer chips, which are used in smartphones, computers, automobiles, medical devices, and industrial machinery. And this makes Taiwan not only important for local trade, but also critical for countries like Japan, China, and the United States. And for English learners, understanding terms like semiconductor and advanced manufacturing helps connect vocabulary to real-world technology and international economic discussions.
Countries like Japan and China rely heavily on Taiwan's semiconductors because they are essential for producing high-tech products and maintaining competitive industries. And any disruption in Taiwan's production could affect supply chains, increase costs, and slow innovation, which shows learners how interdependence in trade and technology links countries economically. and key terms like supply chain, meaning the series of steps to make and deliver a product, and global market, meaning the worldwide network of trade, are used frequently in international news and business discussions.
Economic interdependence is also reflected in trade policies, because Japan imports critical components from Taiwan while exporting machinery, electronics, and raw materials, and China both trades with Taiwan and depends on its technology for manufacturing, which creates a network where disruptions in one country can ripple across multiple economies, and learners can see that phrases like economic interdependence and trade dependency help describe these relationships clearly, connecting English vocabulary directly to real-world global issues in a calm and understandable way.
Taiwan's role in advanced manufacturing is particularly important because the island produces cutting-edge chips using highly specialized technology that few other countries can match, and these chips are used in computers, artificial intelligence devices, and even defense systems. So maintaining smooth trade and stable production is critical for regional and global economies. And learners should note vocabulary like high-tech industry, manufacturing hub, and production capacity to describe how modern economies function and how they rely on cooperation between multiple countries.
Global supply chains are complex networks that connect raw materials, production facilities, transportation systems, and end consumers across multiple countries, and Taiwan is a key node in this network because its semiconductor production is integrated into both Japanese and Chinese technology industries, as well as global markets, meaning that any disruption, whether due to political tension, natural disaster, or technical challenges, can have far-reaching consequences, and English learners can use vocabulary like supply chain resilience to understand discussions about preparedness and reliability in international trade.
For Japan, Taiwan's chips are essential to electronics, automobiles, and robotics, industries that drive its economy, while China relies on these semiconductors for smartphones, data centers, and AI development. And the United States also depends indirectly through imports of final products or components, showing how interconnected economies are across Asia and the world. And learners can benefit from understanding terms like import-export, meaning buying from or selling to other countries, and trade flow, meaning the movement of goods in global commerce.
Advanced manufacturing refers to industries that use highly technical processes, skilled labor, and modern machinery to produce sophisticated products. And Taiwan's semiconductor plants are a clear example of this because they require precise engineering, clean room technology, and constant innovation to maintain competitiveness, which is why countries depend on Taiwan for chips that are difficult to replicate elsewhere. And learners can see how phrases like technological edge and manufacturing excellence are often used in English articles about industry, trade, and global economics.
Economic interdependence creates both opportunity and risk because while countries benefit from access to Taiwan's technology and Japan's or China's markets, they are also vulnerable if production stops, supply chains are disrupted, or trade policies change, making peaceful cooperation essential for continued growth, and vocabulary like interconnected economy, trade vulnerability, and economic stability helps learners understand how global trade relies on mutual reliance rather than conflict, and how economic terms appear in real-world news.
Understanding this economic connection also explains why countries often avoid direct conflict, because the global market and supply chains create mutual dependence, where a crisis in one area can affect industries worldwide, and learners can relate terms like mutual dependence and economic consequences to stories about trade disputes, sanctions, or market fluctuations, showing that economics is deeply intertwined with politics and international relations in ways that are calm, practical, and understandable for English learners.
Finally, recognizing Taiwan's economic importance teaches learners about how trade, technology, and advanced manufacturing connect countries and influence international decisions, And by focusing on vocabulary such as supply chain, global market, advanced manufacturing, technological dependence, and economic interdependence, English learners can follow news reports, understand documentaries, and read articles with confidence while improving comprehension of both language and global affairs in a neutral and educational manner.
When discussing Taiwan, it is important to understand how neighboring countries in Asia observe the situation, because nations like South Korea, members of the ASEAN Group, and Australia all have strong interests in regional stability, trade, and security, and they often respond with cautious statements, strategic planning, and international cooperation to protect their own economies and societies, while avoiding direct involvement in conflicts, which introduces English learners to terms like regional stability and strategic interest, which are common in international news and policy reports.
South Korea, for example, monitors developments closely because it shares economic, political, and security ties with both China and the United States, and any instability near Taiwan could affect trade routes, supply chains, and diplomatic relations. The Korean government generally promotes dialogue and peaceful resolution while remaining prepared for possible emergencies, which teaches learners vocabulary such as contingency planning, meaning preparing for potential future problems, and peaceful resolution, meaning solving disputes without conflict, both of which are central in calm international communication.
ASEAN countries, which include nations such as Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines, often take a neutral but watchful stance because they rely heavily on trade through the South China Sea and value regional cooperation for economic growth and security, and this approach emphasizes careful diplomacy, multilateral dialogue, and avoidance of provocative statements, which introduces learners to the term multilateral diplomacy, meaning negotiations involving several countries to resolve issues or manage shared concerns.
Australia observes Taiwan's situation strategically because it has strong trade links with China and security agreements with the United States, and Canberra generally supports peaceful negotiation, rule-based international order, and the freedom of navigation through key shipping routes, while avoiding direct involvement in disputes unless required. And learners can understand phrases like rule-based order, which refers to agreements and norms that countries follow to reduce conflict, and freedom of navigation, which is a legal principle protecting the movement of ships through international waters.
All these countries prioritize regional stability because instability near Taiwan could disrupt trade, economic growth, and security across the Asia-Pacific region, affecting not only their economies, but also global supply chains that connect technology, manufacturing, and energy sectors. And for English learners, understanding terms like regional cooperation and economic interdependence helps explain why countries work together, communicate carefully, and seek agreements that benefit the larger region without taking sides in a conflict.
Neighboring countries often participate in international forums, issue joint statements, and engage in dialogues to reduce tension, which demonstrates a preference for peaceful communication and collective problem-solving rather than confrontation. And vocabulary, such as diplomatic channels, meaning formal communication paths between governments, and confidence-building measures, meaning actions taken to reduce mistrust, helps learners follow news about international agreements, security discussions, and cooperative efforts across multiple nations.
South Korea, ASEAN members, and Australia also observe military exercises, patrols, and official statements from China, the US, and Japan to assess risks and plan responses, because maintaining situational awareness allows countries to adjust trade policies, defense planning, and emergency strategies, and learners can benefit from understanding phrases like situational awareness, meaning knowledge of the current situation, and risk assessment, meaning evaluating potential dangers, both of which are common in calm, factual discussions about international relations.
Economic and trade considerations are a major reason these countries advocate for stability. because shipping routes near Taiwan and the South China Sea carry essential goods, such as electronics, raw materials, and energy supplies, and any disruption could create shortages or increase costs across the region, which teaches English learners vocabulary like trade route, meaning the path goods travel for commerce, and supply chain disruption, meaning interruptions in the process of making and delivering products, which often appear in international news.
The approach of these neighboring countries also emphasizes coordination, information sharing, and dialogue, because communicating intentions, negotiating agreements, and participating in multilateral talks reduces misunderstandings, builds trust, and creates a network of cooperation that benefits the entire region. And key vocabulary for learners includes coordination, meaning working together efficiently, information sharing, meaning exchanging knowledge, and network of cooperation, meaning connected partnerships between nations.
By observing and learning from these reactions, learners can understand that countries in Asia do not act solely in isolation, but instead take a strategic, careful approach to preserve economic stability, prevent conflict, and encourage dialogue, which demonstrates how diplomacy, multilateral engagement, and peaceful monitoring are as important as military power in maintaining peace. And phrases like strategic approach, peaceful monitoring, and regional engagement are useful vocabulary for following calm, factual news about international relations.
Finally, understanding how South Korea, ASEAN countries, and Australia respond to Taiwan's situation teaches English learners about the broader importance of stability in international relations. Because when nations prioritize dialogue, cooperation, and careful planning, they reduce the risk of miscommunication, maintain trade and technology flows, and protect their citizens' interests. And vocabulary such as stability, regional cooperation, strategic monitoring, and peaceful engagement connects English learning to real-world situations in a neutral, professional, and educational context.
Overall, observing the measured strategic and diplomatic reactions of neighboring countries helps learners understand that calm, factual communication, adherence to international norms, and collaboration are critical in sensitive situations. And by learning these words, following news reports, and connecting vocabulary to real examples, English learners can improve both language skills and comprehension of international relations in a way that is safe, educational, and fully aligned with neutral teaching standards.
When we discuss Taiwan and the surrounding region, it is important to explore possible peaceful paths forward, because countries in East Asia, including China, Japan, Taiwan, the United States, and nearby nations, all benefit when tensions are reduced through dialogue, diplomacy, and cooperation, and learners can understand that peaceful solutions are practical, realistic, and essential for long-term stability, while key vocabulary like diplomatic communication and confidence-building measures appears frequently in international news, reports, and professional discussions.
Diplomatic communication is one of the main ways countries avoid conflicts, because leaders, ambassadors, and foreign ministers use formal channels, meetings, and statements to share intentions, clarify positions, and prevent misinterpretations. And in the Taiwan situation, clear communication helps ensure that military exercises, trade decisions, and political actions are understood as planned and not threatening. And English learners can focus on words like formal channels, meaning official lines of communication, and clarify positions, meaning to explain intentions clearly.
Confidence-building measures are another important tool for peaceful solutions, because they create trust and transparency between nations, and examples include joint exercises with clear rules, information sharing, open notifications of military maneuvers, and multilateral workshops where countries explain strategies, intentions, and policies in a calm, structured way. And learners can use vocabulary such as trust building, transparency, and notification of maneuvers to describe ways countries work together to reduce uncertainty and prevent escalation in international relations.
Trade cooperation is also essential in maintaining peaceful relations, because shared economic interests encourage dialogue and collaboration rather than confrontation. And when countries rely on each other for goods like electronics, semiconductors, energy, and raw materials, they are more likely to resolve disputes through discussion and agreement. And learners can understand terms like economic interdependence, meaning mutual reliance for trade, and shared interests, meaning goals or benefits common to multiple countries, which appear in professional and educational contexts.
Crisis hotlines or rapid communication channels are practical measures used by governments to avoid misunderstandings during tense situations, because they allow military and diplomatic officials to quickly clarify intentions, confirm information, and prevent accidental escalation. And in Asia, these systems are part of broader confidence-building frameworks, which provide stability and predictability. And English learners can benefit from terms like crisis hotline, meaning an emergency communication system, and rapid response, meaning immediate action to address problems or threats.
Countries also conduct regular multilateral meetings, workshops, and joint statements to reduce ambiguity and build common understanding, which allows them to address potential disputes calmly, exchange ideas on security and trade, and collaborate on regional development projects and vocabulary, such as multilateral engagement, meaning interaction among multiple countries, and common understanding, meaning shared knowledge or agreement, helps learners recognize how cooperation is structured in professional international relations contexts.
Transparency in actions, including clear announcements of exercises, policies, or trade measures, is another path forward, because when countries openly share plans and intentions, neighbors can interpret them accurately, reducing fear or miscommunication, and learners can focus on terms like policy transparency, meaning openness in government decisions, and mutual understanding, meaning shared comprehension, which are frequently used in diplomatic statements and educational news analysis.
Education and public diplomacy also play a role in peaceful solutions, because countries can explain international rules, agreements, and their own policies to the public and other nations, which increases awareness, reduces rumors, and supports constructive dialogue. And learners can understand vocabulary, such as public diplomacy, meaning efforts to communicate with foreign populations, and constructive dialogue, meaning discussions that create positive outcomes, which are commonly used in educational and professional settings.
Confidence building and peaceful paths forward often combine multiple strategies, including trade cooperation, diplomatic communication, crisis management, transparency, and public engagement, creating a network of measures that help countries anticipate challenges, reduce tension, and work together effectively. And learners can recognize key terms like preventive diplomacy, meaning actions to stop conflicts before they start, and risk mitigation, meaning reducing potential problems, which appear in neutral and professional English media.
By focusing on these educational and peaceful solutions, learners can see that international relations do not have to be dramatic or threatening, but instead can be structured, strategic, and positive, teaching not only vocabulary like cooperation, dialogue, stability, and peaceful resolution, but also critical thinking skills, analytical understanding, and the ability to follow real-world news in clear professional English, which supports both language learning and global awareness.
Finally, understanding peaceful paths forward emphasizes that calm, measured, and constructive actions are more effective than confrontation, because countries that communicate clearly, coordinate efforts, and build mutual confidence reduce risks for everyone involved, maintain economic stability, and protect citizens. And for English learners, integrating vocabulary such as confidence-building measures, preventive action, mutual trust, and regional cooperation helps connect language learning directly with global education and practical understanding of international relations.
In conclusion, exploring diplomatic communication, trade collaboration, crisis hotlines, confidence-building measures, transparency, and educational outreach provides a positive and realistic framework for international problem-solving, allowing learners to understand and discuss these topics calmly, confidently, and accurately, while expanding their vocabulary and comprehension. And this approach demonstrates that peaceful, structured, and educational strategies are the most effective way to maintain regional stability and mutual understanding in East Asia.
As we reach the conclusion of our discussion about Taiwan, China, Japan, and the United States, it is important to summarize the key points in simple, clear English, because understanding global issues helps learners expand their vocabulary, develop critical thinking, and follow international news with greater confidence. And for English learners, terms like diplomacy, interdependence, regional stability, and peaceful resolution are not only useful for reading or listening, but also for discussing world events in a professional and neutral way.
Throughout this episode, we explained Taiwan's historical background, China's stance, Japan's strategic concerns, and the role of the United States. And we explored economic interdependence, trade, technology, and semiconductors, as well as how neighboring countries like South Korea, ASEAN members, and Australia respond. And learners can see that understanding vocabulary such as supply chain, confidence-building measures, strategic monitoring, and multilateral engagement allows them to follow news articles, documentaries, and discussions about global affairs in English.
We also emphasized the importance of military readiness balanced with diplomatic communication, showing that countries often use exercises, patrols, or displays of strength not to create conflict, but to signal intentions, maintain security, and support negotiation. And learners can focus on words like deterrence, risk assessment, preventive diplomacy, and crisis hotline to describe these actions clearly, while understanding that international relations involve careful planning, observation, and communication rather than immediate confrontation or dramatic escalation.
Economic interdependence, particularly related to Taiwan's semiconductor industry, demonstrates how trade, advanced technology, and global supply chains connect countries, and learners can see that vocabulary like global market, advanced manufacturing, trade dependency, and economic stability helps explain why countries cooperate, reduce risks, and prioritize peaceful engagement, showing that economics and diplomacy are closely connected, and understanding these words makes news coverage and academic discussions in English much easier to follow.
We also discussed how Asian countries like South Korea, ASEAN nations, and Australia react strategically and peacefully, emphasizing diplomacy, monitoring, and cooperation. And learners can recognize phrases like regional cooperation, strategic interest, multilateral diplomacy, and peaceful monitoring to describe these behaviors in English, which shows that international relations often rely on careful observation, structured communication, and collaboration rather than immediate action or emotional responses.
In exploring possible peaceful paths forward, we highlighted diplomatic communication, confidence-building measures, crisis hotlines, transparency, and public diplomacy. And learners can understand that vocabulary such as constructive dialogue, trust-building, preventive action, and mutual understanding is not only practical for English comprehension, but also provides a framework for thinking critically about world events, assessing risks, and following news coverage without bias or sensationalism.
For English learners, this episode demonstrates that following world news is not just about memorizing facts, but about understanding relationships, strategies, and the language used to describe complex situations, because terms like alliances, partnerships, confidence-building measures, regional stability, and strategic planning appear repeatedly in professional news sources, and learning their meanings helps learners read articles, listen to podcasts, and participate in discussions confidently and accurately.
Critical thinking is also an essential skill emphasized throughout this discussion, because analyzing causes, effects, and connections between countries allows learners to form their own understanding of global issues, and English learners can see that using vocabulary such as interdependence, negotiation, risk mitigation, and peaceful resolution not only strengthens language skills but also improves the ability to interpret international events, which is especially helpful when following live news, academic content, or professional analyses in English.
Finally, we want to inspire all our listeners to continue improving their English by connecting language learning to real-world topics like Taiwan, China, Japan, and global diplomacy, because following international issues helps learners apply vocabulary in context, develop listening and comprehension skills, and understand the world more clearly, and remembering key words such as diplomacy, trade, technology, alliances, and regional cooperation allows learners to confidently engage with English language media and discussions.
We sincerely thank all our listeners for joining us on this educational journey, and we hope that by explaining complex topics in simple, clear, and structured English, we have made global affairs more accessible, useful, and enjoyable for learners at every level. And we encourage our audience to practice these words, follow international news calmly, think critically, and share their observations with others, because consistent practice and curiosity are the keys to improving English and understanding the world simultaneously.
Before we end, we want to express our gratitude for your support, for liking this video, subscribing to the English Globe, and sharing your thoughts in the comments, because your participation helps us create more educational content that connects English learning with global awareness. And we hope that listeners feel more confident discussing Taiwan, China, Japan, and the US, using the vocabulary, concepts, and strategies we explored, and continue their journey to improve both language and understanding of international news.
In closing, remember that learning English through real-world topics like this allows you to grow vocabulary, improve listening and reading skills, and develop analytical thinking, while also gaining insight into international cooperation, trade, diplomacy, and peaceful strategies. And we thank our global audience for tuning in, encouraging curiosity, and helping build a supportive learning community. And we look forward to exploring more complex and fascinating topics together in clear, simple, and educational English in future episodes.